a quorum. So
Okay,
Thanks,
great.
Luke.
No problem. See you guys.
See
Take
ya.
care. as soon as Sylvia is in, and there she is, we have a quorum, so we can start the meeting. Steve will not be with us tonight. I think he's been informed about most of it, but we shall have our meeting. So let's see. I want to share my screen for a change. There it is. And there it is. Okay, welcome to the committee. We are now 4 members. Hope we pick up a new member with respect to the new members when they get named to the board. As far as I know, they're not named yet. And this will probably be, more than likely be, as I will explain later, our last Zoom meeting. So come September, we get to see each other again in person. The minutes was sent out and amended. And first, we welcome everybody, and glad you're all here. Welcome Omar and Bob to our confab. Now, the minutes were submitted. There was a request for amendment that came from Camelia on the basis that, and you all know I'm a terrible keyboardist. And apparently after I cut and pasted the whole section under discussion, this is item 3B, the conflict of interest board, so on, I apparently left some things out, certainly unintentionally. And then Steve looked over the whole thing and then sent some other suggestions and comments. So I sent to you the amended minutes. So we're now talking about the amended minutes from the first one that went out. But I'm asking now if there's any additional amendments anyone would like to suggest. David, Sylvia?
None that I
I have
noticed.
none.
Okay, take a vote. Motions, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you. Anyone against? Anyone abstaining? Well, what do you know? 3-0. Very good. So I can skip all of these pages. And now I come to chair's report. First thing is, I have not seen it. And I did come in late, perhaps Bob can fill us in. I did come in late with respect to the executive meeting, and it was under discussion when I joined. But it is apparent that our community board meeting in 2 weeks is going to be held in person at the College of Mount St. Vincent. And that the procedures for hybrid meetings is about to go into effect. My fear, of course, is that we have not been in close contact for these many months. And I hope we all know how to greet each other in civil manner. I read too much to begin with, but I read too much about kids losing their ability to communicate and work with other people. Of course, they have been away from people for too long. Now, I am going to impose, presuming I am renamed by the board to continue as chair of this committee, I'm going to impose a new ruling to try and keep things going smoothly. And that is, if anyone, and that includes members of the public, have suggestions for under new business, then they will be accepted under three conditions. Number one, that the information or requested or to be presented has come to the chair before the meeting, so that any additional materials that board members would, or committee members would need for a reasonable discussion can be distributed or presented. Or that the item that they're introducing is not for us to act upon at the meeting, but for future discussion. Or three, the item has a sense of urgency and requires immediate action. Under those three conditions, or any one of those three conditions, we will discuss new business. Other than that, I will not entertain it for discussion. Any thoughts on that?
I think that gives a very reasonable amount of discretion for the committee chair.
Sylvia, any comment?
No, I agree.
Thank you. Now, obviously, the reason for this is somewhat prompted by the discussion that came up last month. And so Camelia kept referring to the Ethical Guidance Manual, Part 2, Section 4. And it's an entirety, nothing is missing. The committee is available on an open and confidential basis for information or advice to any appointed board member or any community committee member upon approval of the chair. The committee is obligated to inform the board of official reports, decisions, and advice provided for guidance of community boards. The committee maintains a reference file for such information for the benefit of the board and community members. I am convinced, as I will show, that we have not violated this, but there are a couple of things in here of concern, which I think we need to look at and or address, but certainly be aware of. This first phrase, an open or confidential basis, where is there a choice? Is there a presumption, as followed by the next line? Or three, the committee maintains a reference file of such information for the benefit of board and community members. I don't know of any such file. I have checked with Luke, and there is no such file in the board office. So I don't know of any predecessor who maintains a file. If this refers to the stuff I get from COIB, it is, as I'll explain later again, it is, we discuss it. When I get it, I share it with the committee. We look at it. But I don't save it in any particular place, other than knowing that, just like with the Committee on Open Government, the Conflict of Interest Board also maintains an online file of all of its findings. And I don't know if that satisfies that. And finally, this phrase, upon approval of the chair, I'm not sure what that quite means. As I will show shortly, in the full context, items have come before me or before the committee. I have discussed them with the persons who have made a request. And the issue then becomes, the issue here is, am I required under this ethical guidance manual to inform the entire board of what took place and what communications I had? It says open or confidential. It certainly cannot be both simultaneously. So I raise that for you to think about. Now, Steve helped me to identify the first three items of what Camelia's concerns were, whether or not the EGM provision conflicts with prior or current practice. If it conflicts, how to amend the provision. If it conflicts, how to change the practice. And I added a fourth. There are a number of personal attacks on my qualifications to serve as chair, believing that this position in the past was taken by a member of the bar. I never claimed to be a member of the bar, and people know that I'm not. So those are the four major concerns. My response, and I will read this. The chair has been approached by members concerning a wide range of inquiries, such as can I vote, parliamentary procedure, past practices, interpretation of bylaws, establishing procedures for hybrid meetings, public announcement session meetings, when there is an anticipated executive session, policies for naming streets and/or parts of parks for individuals or buildings, amendments to the bylaws or the ethical guidance manual, etc. The chair does not maintain a folder of inquiries or responses. Not all items required a committee decision. Chair is not aware of any CB8 repository maintained by his predecessors. If this refers to finding and/or settlements, capital F, findings and/or settlements from the COIB that are discussed when issued from COIB, the full history is available from our minutes or the COIB website. In all cases, the chair has offered his best judgment, brought the issue to the committee, and then the board, and when appropriate, has recommended contacting COIB. COIB, and this comes directly from their publication. COIB is the independent non-mayoral city agency charged with interpreting, administering, and enforcing the city's conflict of interest law, and so on. So the committee takes up controversial issues and/or convenes as part of an ethics, or if there's an ethics or disciplinary committee, after there's a formal request in writing. In the issue that prompted this discussion, no board member or community committee member filed a written complaint. Members of the public with concerns were advised to contact COIB directly. Again, in this instance, the person about whom there was concern, founded or not, was advised to contact COIB directly. I recall an incident this year when I rose to advise a board member that she had a conflict and couldn't vote. What I have not done, and perhaps should have, was call out members who I felt were crossing the line on civility. Note, the committee has shared with the board a statement of civility. So that's my general response. And I'm going to move forward a little bit because my final item here is for discussion. And there it is, discussion. Any thoughts on the issue in general? You guys have to call on people. David?
Yeah, I think this is good. I mean, ideally, a committee should be run with all the information made available to committee members in advance. Excuse me. And I think that's your starting point. And then, we voted, the board voted for you, or, in whatever case, the whatever committee chair, to be responsible for reacting in the case of somebody bringing up some new business that no one was aware of, that you were not aware of, and then you being able to use your judgment to say, this is more complex and needs more time, or we're only 25 minutes in and this is a light topic, so we can squeeze it in. But I mean, I think the starting point of things being run through you in advance so you can have it on the agenda and provide whatever relevant documents are is a good one, and then using your discretion afterward.
Thank you. Sylvia?
I don't know. I think that basically we have been doing that. If someone had something new to bring before the committee, you did put them off and said that, we would do it at a future meeting. I don't think that we've done anything wrong so far that it needs to be corrected. That's my feeling.
Thank you. The only question of concern is, I guess, this phrase, or is it an open or confidential basis? Is there a presumption by this statement that after you and I have, any one of you have a conversation, that it's my obligation to go before the board and say, I spoke with John Doe. He thought he had a conflict and I told him he didn't, or he shouldn't vote, or whatever or he should go to COIB. Do I have to, is this imply that I need to make public declarations every time somebody asks me a question? Or anytime someone asks me a question?
Well, I think
It should-
that basically the LRE has always been a place where you could go confidential. If you have a very sensitive issue that you don't want to make public for everyone, I think that that should remain because of the nature of some of the things that come up. So not everything should be open.
Mm,
David?
I disagree on, disagree with. I think that the board, it should be memorialized somehow. And I'm not sure about to what extent, but that John Doe made an inquiry of the LRE chair regarding recusal or conflict or interpretation of Robert's rules or whatever. And, you know, to the degree that you think it's appropriate, add your response. But if it's confidential, maybe just leave it at, you know, that that John Doe mentioned that he felt he had a conflict of interest, and I agreed. You know, that level of detail. Again, leaving it up to the discretion of the LRE chair.
I think we've had some very difficult subjects that came up during Rosemary's term and also during Laura's term. And those things should not be made public. Those should be kept under wraps because they are that sensitive. They are, they just shouldn't be brought to the general public. There are things that happen within the LRE that has always been a place you could go to get help. And if someone is going to be brought up on charges or anything like that, that is not the business of the rest of the members of the committee, of the board. I wouldn't want that. And I had a situation like that and it was kept under wraps and I'm glad that it did and it went away and everybody seemed to be satisfied. I do not think that that should be in the Riverdale Press.
I'm looking at the list here. Where does it start? Looking at the list here that I just created for, that didn't help any. All right. So a question, this did happen, a member of the board came to me and asked whether or not he could vote. And after suggesting why I thought he could or shouldn't, I then asked him to go to COIB. Does that have to be public? Parliamentary procedures, they're generally public. Past practices, they're generally public. I'm trying to look. I mean, there are two issues that came up. I didn't put one down. And the issue I know that Sylvia is still unhappy with me about when I was asked whether or not the search committee could hold an interview on the seventh day of Passover. Now that became public, but it wasn't designed, it was designed as a question asked of me, but appropriately became public because it did violate the sensitivities of a number of people. The issue of, and Bob is on here, the issue of how to announce, if we could announce that an upcoming interview session would be an executive session, and therefore attempting to discourage people from signing in who would be allowed to be there for the taking of the attendance and the vote, and then turned off. And it was noted that Bob did contact me, and I in turn did contact, I believe I contacted COG. Yes, I did contact COG because COG was adamant that one could not predict that a meeting, even though one knew in his heart and soul that it would go into executive session, one in theory could not predict that such would be the case. That being said, it also became public knowledge, and I don't deny it, but it wasn't necessarily designed for a public discussion. So I come back to this phrase, do we leave it? Or just, do we let it stand there, or do we have to change it? Because the "or," I believe, gives us the option.
Can we do it just on particular items that come up and make that decision as the chair or the committee? Do we have to put that in writing?
No, I frankly, based on your conversation, and my belief is that this is a what do you call it? A call that I make or others make as A, if they want confidentiality, or B, if I think this doesn't require full discussion. Now, it could be the question of how to best handle, which I'm going to do next on the agenda, how to best handle the announcements of public notice is perhaps should have come before the committee. I think the timing didn't make that possible. But I think that phrase, an open or confidential, makes it a judgment call on my part. And the other one is unless you consider referring board members to the Conflict of Interest Board website for up to the date or the history of decisions and findings, then I don't think we need to begin establishing such a file. And now I leave it to your judgment, either to move on or do something.
I think we're talking, in my mind, we're talking about two different things. One is that you're addressing a person who either thinks or he doesn't think that he can vote, and you're trying to clear that up, things like that. And then there are personal things that come up in your role as the chair of the LRE that are very personal, and those things should stay confidential. And I don't know how we can break this up, but I think that has to be broken up.
I need you to add a sentence or two. I'm not sure where you went with that.
Well, it's very clear. Either someone is coming to you and that issue that they bring up as to whether they can vote or they can't vote or that kind of thing is something that maybe the other members should know, and it should be an open thing so that they don't make the same mistake. But as far as personal things that have arisen, those things should be confidential and not spread all over the board. That's my feeling.
In the case at hand, and I still want to maintain confidentiality, the individual is employed by an organization that had business before the board. And we had a vote on something concerning that organization. The question was, as an employee, did that person have a conflict of interest? My suggestion was this person was not in a decision-making position relative to the employment, and that I truly was not quite sure what to advise, and I recommended he contact COIB. Now, does the community board have to know that that conversation took place?
Marty, I don't know if you could see your screen, but you have a couple of hands up.
I cannot see my screen.
I suspected that. Okay, well, I've had my hand up for a little while and David has his up as well. If you'll permit me, I'm not a member of the committee, but if you'll permit me to make a comment.
In the interest of, go ahead.
Yeah, I hope it's in the interest of clarification rather than obfuscation, but I'll leave that to your judgment. But, you know, with regard to something that is community board business, to take the example that you mentioned earlier about whether it was appropriate to have the search committee meet on the last 2 days of Passover, for example, that certainly should be public, you know, because it was about a community board meeting, a public meeting. So it was entirely appropriate for that to be public. And, you know, I approached you with the understanding that there was nothing confidential about the opinion that I was seeking from you. On the other hand, I could imagine a situation where somebody wants your advice about something. Let's say it's about, you know, whether the person should or should not vote on a particular matter because of some personal detail that they would rather not be made public, that in fact should not be made public. I'm not sure that there's any reason why that needs to be addressed in an amendment to the bylaws, you know, that somebody can contact you and say, Marty, I would like your advice on this particular issue, knowing that you're the parliamentarian, the chair of LRE, you know, what would be the appropriate thing to do? I mean, that's somebody speaking to you on a personal basis. I don't see why that needs to be addressed in or documented in any way in any community board guidance manual. So, you know, so that's my understanding of why there could be situations where, you know, you're simply being approached because of your knowledge and somebody wants your advice. So you know, how you decide to interpret that with regard to this proposed amendment to the ethical guidance manual, I will leave to your judgment, Sylvia's and David's. But, you know, I'm just presenting a situation where I can see where confidentiality is in fact appropriate.
David?
Yes, basically, if you don't make a decision such as I recommend you go to COIB, then there's nothing to document. If you do make a decision on behalf of the board that somebody should recuse, not recuse, abstain, not abstain, what have you, I don't think you need to go into the details of why, but you probably should go into, as LRE chair, I advise John Doe that he or she should abstain from this topic before the ABC committee. And if you know, if it's extraordinarily personal, and unfortunately I can't think of an example, I guess it could be dealt with. But I mean, I am confident that 99 out of 100 times it's going to be, Marty, can I vote? And you'll say yes or no. And you know, and I don't think you need to reveal what the conflict is. But just that John Doe thought that he or she might have a conflict, and the chair agreed or disagreed because you are making taking an action on behalf of the board.
It is, thank you. It is my impression at this moment, and respect to Bob, as I recall, yes, the discussion later on was it violated some sensitivities, but in the timing, I don't recall being enough time to go before the committee or the board to make such a request about use of that date. But what I'm getting the impression here is that I can hang my hat on on the word or. Where is it? On the word or, because it doesn't have to be open, and it can be judgmental as to whether it's confidential. So in bringing this to a close, I hope, is that we're recommending to leave it as it is.
I'm fine with that.
I'm fine with that too.
Perfect. Thank you. Now, this next item is FYI. I'm not anticipating, unless David wants to say something, I'm not anticipating any necessary conversation. At the executive committee last week, there was some concern about what the bylaws say with respect to the existence of a budget committee. Julie Reyes was kind enough, could have found it myself, but kind enough to give me the excerpt from the bylaws. And it reads here, Budget Committee shall be limited to the elected chairpersons of the committee, those officers of the board designated by the board chairperson to sit on the committee, and the chairpersons of the following committees. And without going one by one, my presumption is the selection of these committees was because they generally make requests of the agency with which they have some affiliation.
And you and Chuck don't, basically.
And theory, we don't. Although 2
Right.
years ago, there was a request that came from the Land Use Committee,
Right,
which
right.
added. And this is what I wrote her back. I thank you, I thank you, and that happened, thank you for your reference. Oh, no, I think Rosemary was correct. Rosemary spoke up, and she pointed out the exec working with the chairs of the board, along with the board chair and budget chair, make up the budget committee with the input from the DM. What troubles me, and this is somewhat of an aside, is the seeming underlying belief that we control a pile of money and that we distribute it. In fact, the wish list is superseded by the mayor's overall directions to his commissioners and the commissioner's own priorities. An item may appear over and over as the same top 10 items, but if the agency doesn't want the item, it will be ignored 10 times. And if an item is listed as number 101, and we don't go that high, the agency, what?
Close. We were about
Well-
85.
Okay. So if it's listed as 101, which is above what we
Yeah,
have,
I know. I'm being facetious, sorry.
then it shall make the budget. This was always a political document to express our community's priorities with public consumption, for public consumption. David's point that it reflects support for the needs of the whole community is valid. So the comment was made by the request, in effect, was made by Julie. My response, I think, stands on its own. And I just bring up to your attention that this issue came up and question of what the bylaws call for. Any thoughts?
If I may share, actually, just due to timing, and the lack of a district manager, we just didn't have that three-way meeting that we always had, but we did that today. At least for the capital budget, and we'll do it again on Wednesday for the expense budget. And, you know, there's a lot of back and forth, but it was a productive meeting. I only wish that it happened the 1st of May. That's why, you know, every month I kept on harping on April 20th, April 20th, April 20th, and several people got theirs in late. So there really wasn't enough time before May 7th, I think it was, or May 3rd to do it before exec. But the idea, just for your information, the idea is that the three of us look at it from the perspective of, as you know, the whole district, and then reflect upon that, the individual chair sentiments, and basically we came up with that. And that's what we've done for 5 years. So,
Okay, I'm not asking you for a chronology.
yep,
I just,
yep.
the issue came up and I'm sharing it for the purposes of the committee. Bob?
Yeah, thank you, Marty. Yeah, I don't want to get into the details because they're really not appropriate of what happened or didn't happen. But it is certainly true that the whole point of these priorities, both capital and expense, is that they serve the entire community board, a community. And that's what the individual chairs themselves are encouraged to bear in mind as they draw up their priorities. And it's certainly what the board should do as it draws up its priorities. That, you know, we serve a large area, and our priorities should reflect the needs of that entire area. So that has always been the understanding. That isn't something that just emerged at the last executive committee meeting. That has always been the understanding of what the goal of all these capital and expense priorities is.
And again, my issue here is
No
just
debate.
outlining membership as opposed to operations. But your point is well taken, Bob. Finally, not finally, but the issue came up, and again, Bob is here. The issue came up that logic would tell you that when the search committee, any search committee, which is dealing with the hiring of a potential employee, that the communication between the committee and an applicant should be an executive session. Not with respect to the nominating committee, because it's the members of the board are not covered by the sense of needing to go to the executive session. Because I tried that a couple of years back and COG told me no way. But we're now talking about outsiders who are applying for a job. Discussion will be on previous job experience, salary expectations, what their past employment history looks like, etc. Much of this should be held in confidentiality. The issue doubled down here. Of course, we were dealing entirely with Zoom, which makes lives interesting because one does not have to show up to a meeting if one wanted to sit in on it. One nearly has to Zoom in. And the question became, if you Zoomed in, worse so if you came to the meeting and you saw who the candidates were who was sitting in the anteroom waiting for their interview, then that confidentiality will be destroyed immediately. In some cases, people are looking for jobs. Their employers do not know they're looking for a job. In some cases, I mean, I can go on with cases, but the issue is that you do not want, the committee didn't want, and I agree that they knew in advance. There were 3 members of the committee. 3 members had agreed they would meet and interview in executive session But the Committee on Open Government says there's no such thing as anticipating an executive session. You have to meet and vote to go into it. So the issue here became, what is the best language to inform the public we're having a public meeting we don't want you to attend in one form or another. The yellow here indicates the final statement that the committee, and with some input from me, I take no sense of ownership here, but that was a statement that went out. We shared this statement last month. There were several people who said, we need to work on it. Fine. I asked individuals, I asked committee members, if you have a suggestion, please submit it. So Steve came up with a suggestion and David came up with a suggestion. And so in the hope that you have read these, but I'll still go through them. Steve Fruit, please see the attached envelope. Again, what we're looking for is, we're having a meeting. We cannot predict that there will be executive session, but we certainly expect it to be. And you will not be able to sit in with that part of the meeting. Steve Fruit, please see the attached and below notice for a meeting on the Bronx CB8 District Manager Search Committee. Kindly note that the search committee anticipates that after the committee's roll call is taken, a motion to go into executive session will be introduced. In that event, in the event that the motion should pass, the interview will be conducted in executive session, and there will be no participation by members of the public or anyone other than members of the search committee. David suggested, kindly note that due to privacy and current employment considerations for the candidates, under the rules of the open meetings law, we typically go into executive session and after we roll, okay, and the rest. I think both have merit and should be considered. Unless someone has a point to make, I am of the impression that we'll not come to a conclusion tonight on how to synthesize these into a single coherent statement. And
Marty,
so I don't
Marty,
think
I'm
we're going,
comfortable with your blending them as you see fit.
well, okay, thank you. As a draft,
Yeah, that's fine.
and I'd be happy to do that. And I just noted, I've done before, I say this with both my fingers crossed and hope in my heart, we're not going to need this statement for a long time to come.
Did we
So it's-
not have a search committee for the district the office coordinator and the office, for Luke and for Pablo's job? Did we not have a search committee? It was only the DM's work to find those people?
I believe that both of them went through a search committee process. And
Well, then the
board-
language should reflect that too, right?
It could, okay. Yes, so this one specifically says district manager, but I can widen that out to employees in general, but I'll play with it.
Yeah, like confidential CB8, Bronx CB8 office employees.
Okay, I'm gonna play with that for it also. Bronx,
Bob's hand is up.
Yeah, Marty, I have a question for you. I agree that, yes, in this particular case, I knew ahead of time that we were going to go into executive session because, as you say, there were only 3 members of the committee and we had already discussed this. But I do agree with the point that in general, one should not assume that a vote is going to be taken and that the outcome of the vote is known. So I'm fine with Steve's language that says in the event that the motion should pass, the interview will be conducted in executive session and so on. I take the point that that the more general wording is appropriate. I don't know about David's suggestion because it's always been my understanding that when a motion is made to go into executive session, we have to cite the relevant portion of the open meetings law to explain why we are going into executive session. It's generally 105F, which has to do with employment, financial, or medical information regarding somebody. And of course, when we're looking for the office, then it's 105F, which has to do with real estate. But I think that has to be stated at the time that the motion is made. So I'm not sure that we need to specify the reason for doing it. But again, I have no objection to it if that's the determination that we make, and I leave it entirely in your hands, Marty, to do as you choose.
But you are correct. When a resolution is made, it needs to be specific. I don't know that the statement has to be, excuse me, as specific. But it's worth consideration. Thank you, David.
Yeah, Bob's right. The specific language of 105 F and whatever should be stated at the time. This is just for transparency, and that's why there's soft language. Kindly note that due to privacy and current employment considerations, we typically, not that we must or we will, but we typically, so as an advisory to anybody who might want to attend and then to be blindsided by it, they might think that we are trying to hide something. If by stating it up front like this in soft language, the others, the typically non-board members, would be aware that this will happen and why it's happening. It's not a mandate, it's just an advisory for transparency.
I see two different kinds of meetings, and Cog scoffed at me for trying to make a distinction. One kind of meeting is, and you've indicated a possibility, the search for a new facility for the office. That generally comes under a board meeting and an item on the agenda. And when we get to that item, a motion is made and you go into executive session, and usually at the end of the meeting, so that those who are present, who are not part of the board, can go into the waiting room until after the decision is made and we come out of executive session. That's one kind. The second kind, and the point that Cog scoffed at me over, is when a meeting is called specifically to go into executive session, which I believe these were, and they were insistent. There's no way of predicting that there would be an executive session, and therefore we have to be as ginger, but they said there's no reason why we can't say we anticipate going into executive session. So I keep those things in mind, but I will take David's advice and suggestion. I will do a synthesis, and before the September meeting, you will have a, I don't know if it's color coded or not, but a draft statement, which we can agree upon and hopefully put in the vault for some future board to consider.
Don't use colors, just do it at once. There'll be no prejudice that it came from this person or that. Just whatever you use in your best judgment will be fine.
Thank you. As next item, as you will recall at the last meeting, I noted that Bronx Times had did stories on two Bronx community boards who were having difficulty with activity by board members specifically. Camelia made a point of using foul language, inappropriate language, and the question of civility was out the window. She had been a strong advocate for the position that incivility was too often too often the sense of our very own meetings in Board 8. And so we talked about setting up a code of conduct for the board. Totally, oh, I think it's totally unrelated. The borough president sent out this past week a letter reappointing or a letter of reappointment to members of the board. And in going along with that reappointment letter was a code of conduct, which she felt board members needed to sign and adhere to. And she held out the last item on that code is she has the authority to remove board members who did not adhere to the code. Now, I don't know how many of you, I know I got one. I don't know how many of you received such letters and have seen the code, but I took it upon myself to take the code. I sent this to you last week. This is practically entirely our code, but I added the sense that community participants need to adhere to this code as much as board members do, even though her focus was on board members. And so I'm recommending this as a draft of a Board 8 code of conduct. And I think it's too much to swallow, so this will probably also go into September, but I want to bring back a report to the board when we meet in 2 weeks. Any comments from anyone?
Yeah, Marty, I think that the first and the fourth paragraphs could be included possibly with the agenda because they're not too laborious. The second and third really refers to the actions generally of board members. But you know, the first and the fourth, I think, are civility, how to act during a meeting, and that the committee or board chair can remove somebody from a meeting.
I can accept that. Sylvia?
I'm sorry. I don't think that our board has shown that they are not civil. Sometimes their voices get louder than other times because they're passionate about what they're thinking. I think that all of this code of conduct, it works for the borough president, but I'm not quite sure that we should have this as a formal thing and repeat it before every meeting. We have not had that from the public, and that's really why you would be bringing it up before a meeting, because the members really are well behaved, I would think. And I think we're overdoing this whole civility thing. My opinion.
Well, I agree with your last statement that we've had no difficulties with members of the community at all. But I just thought it'd be even-handed to do it that way.
I actually would differ on that, and Sylvia, I agree with you. I think that basically the board members have done a fine job, but I will bring to your attention a couple of folks who are protesting the charter school off of Tibbet Avenue related to the international school, whatever that little bizarre plot of land, were unaware and quite rude. You know, and saying, well, what the hell are we doing here? Because, you know, we were told we'd be able to talk, and going on. And I think that the first and fourth paragraph could be useful to be in the agenda so that they read it and understand it, and also understand that the chair could remove them from a meeting.
I think I have to go back to what I said. And you can disagree with me, that's fine. The code of conduct that the borough president sent with the reappointment letters, and I got one, was a totally different thing. I think that many times you have people on the board as members who maybe have more experience in a certain area, and therefore they're more passionate as to what they share at a meeting and do raise their voices. Just because you ask a question doesn't mean that you are threatening anybody and or that you're being uncivil. Unfortunately, that has happened in our board, and it has been held against members of the board who no longer are with us. And I think that the whole thing is a shame, because those people, and I'm not pointing a finger at anyone in particular, but they contributed a great deal to our meetings and to our board, and we no longer have them. If you feel like I do as to some of the new people who don't step forward and they don't do anything, I don't know how the new crop is going to be, but being that the older ones have been removed because they asked questions, I think that's wrong. I can't really do anything about the borough president. She has her own axe to grind. But to make this so monumental, I think is wrong.
Sylvia, I
Marty,
need to,
would you permit me to speak?
yeah, just one thought first. Sylvia, I need to disagree with you. And I commend you to go back and look at some of the tapes of some of our meetings. We have had personal attacks. We have had nastiness toward one another. It is, the word disrespectful here is appropriate. And I think the combination of having something like this and the fact that the borough president did something are certainly helpful, hopefully, to prevent any of that in the future. Bob?
Yeah, thank you, Marty. Yeah, I will, well, let me start with a question. With regard to this code of conduct, I mean, first of all, I have heard, and again, I don't know this to be a fact, but I have heard that all board members are going to be asked to sign the code of conduct, whether they are up for reappointment or not. We'll find out, whether that is accurate information. But certainly I have no objection to that. I think this is an appropriate thing for every board member to be asked to adhere to. I want to be clear, I may have missed something. I want to be clear on whether you're suggesting, Marty, that we do something with this code of conduct, add it to the ethical guidance manual, or post it on the website, or what exactly is it that you think we might consider doing?
At the moment, all three were suggested for us to think about. I'm making no suggestions specifically. Add
Okay,
to
all right.
the guidance manual, add it to the bylaws, post it on all of the meeting notices. What do you call it? Read it out at board meetings or committee meetings and/or committee meetings. I just open that up for discussion without making any suggestion.
Okay, all right. Well, thanks for that. Yeah, I also want to be clear. Nobody was denied reappointment because they asked questions or because they were passionate. There were board members who were denied reappointment because of behavior, which is a different issue. With regard to the public, I'd say that so far, the committee chairs and the board chair have been good at trying to keep meetings civil as much as possible. The, what's the word I'm looking for? The admonitions that went out this past year from the board chair and also from you, Marty, about civility were directed at board members. And it is unfortunate that some board members didn't really appreciate the significance of those statements. But, that's entirely in the judgment of the borough president, whom she chooses to reappoint and does not. But I think this is this is very appropriate, and we need to be reminded of what constitutes proper behavior and what does not. But yeah, how we decide to make this some part of our bylaws, ethical guidance manual, whatever, I think that's a good discussion to have, and I look forward to continuing to discuss it.
David,
I agree. Marty, take a look at it, and kindly make a suggestion that we can bring to the board, because the board should decide on this. But I think the idea of putting the first and fourth paragraphs, somewhere small in the agenda, just to make the community aware of expectations. I think that could be useful, but I'm quite open on this.
I accept your suggestion to drop the second and third. And the first two, first and fourth, would be very succinct and right to the point. And sounds fine to me. Sylvia, has your opinion changed in any way?
No, I stand by what I said, and I disagree with Bob.
But you do so amicably.
I have no choice.
Not being amicable?
Sylvia, you do
Let's
have a
just
choice.
drop it.
All right, so
Marty,
Yeah.
we may want to trim the language a little bit. For example, the second sentence, just, maybe participants shall treat all with respect and dignity, and avoid using language, because it is still pretty wordy.
okay, well, here's what I plan to do. Usual procedure is that this goes, what would have gone in a regular month, would have gone directly to the executive committee following our meeting, but they already had that meeting. So at best, we have to wait for September. So there's no rush on the exact language, but I will make a statement to the board that we are, based on what the borough president has done, we plan to put forward a code of conduct for our board, wording to follow in September.
Good, and we will also have had the experience of at least one full public meeting in June. So that could, give us advice or whatever about how to approach this. But I think, I don't think it's an emergency, and it can wait till September.
And I
I agree,
believe,
Marty. I think that's an excellent decision. Bring it up at the executive committee meeting in September.
and that's what I shall do. There's something else I wanted to say, which is evading me at the moment. I don't know, probably come back later. Okay, so I think we've resolved this issue for the moment. Moving on. So we're not going to discuss where it goes until we discuss what it is. That will also wait for December. There were 4 new items that came out of the Conflict of Interest Board. One is, well, they're all interesting. On 2 occasions, a Queensborough President's Office person, who you think someone of high authority like that, who was given a placard for parking around the Queens Courthouse, ended up trying to use it or using it. City Hall, was it say, on Center Street. And on 2 occasions. Well, for those 2 occasions where she parked a private car using her Queens placard there, she took an 8-day suspension worth about $2,000 for that misuse. Now, this is interesting. An associate housing inspector I have no idea what the title means. City Department of Housing. Was also an Uber driver, and while he should have been working, was Ubering. And so
Wow.
he ended up with a $250 fine, the board, and a 1-day suspension for, I don't know how much he made in tips on that, but it certainly had to be less than that. And certainly a violation. This is interesting. Payroll secretary asked an assistant principal. This is interesting to me. The payroll secretary asked the then AP if she could work for him, basically using his license for real estate. Everything was hunky-dory apparently until this assistant principal became the principal. And by becoming the principal, she is now a direct employee responding to supervisor, the principal. And the principal paid a $10,000 commission, which now wasn't a problem when he was the AP, is a problem now that he's the principal. And so he had to pay a $1,500 fine, and she had to pay a $1,000 fine, which is far less than the $10,000 commissions that she got. And this one's interesting also, an assistant principal. I point out here, it says 3 joint statements, but there are only 2 items. That's because this one is both this position A and 1 and 2.
Okay.
An AP was asked a subordinate teacher to co-sign a college loan for the assistant principal's daughter. The teacher did not agree. The AP sent a message to the teacher begging her. She again declined. Now, I don't know how it went from this conversation to the Conflict of Interest Board, but by asking the subordinate to co-sign a loan, the AP attempted to use the position for personal gain, and he had to pay, he or she doesn't say, $1,250 for this violation. Interesting.
Marty, is it my imagination or are all of these cases incredible stupidity on their part? I mean, I just can't imagine anybody doing any of these in all of these months. I'm astonished.
Well, the 2 that stand out in my mind is the deputy Bronx Borough president who was using her office for political purposes and got snagged, and the chancellor of the city of New York who took free tickets for use by Board of Ed employees and gave it to his wife so they could go to a ballet or a ball game or something together. And he was penalized. So yes, some of these represent to me total stupidity.
Incredible.
Marty, I've been reading these ever since you started doing them, and I have to say, of everything we get from the community board office, of every committee's minutes, these are far and away my favorites. They are just fascinating to see the ways in which people will do, as David says, stupid things to try to make a buck, which is really what all of these boil down to. Saving on parking or, getting a commission on a sale or whatever it might be. This will never end. Next month, or not next month, but September, there'll be another set. October, there'll be more. It's my favorite reading. It's the most entertaining thing that comes out of the community board.
Well, I'll contact COIB and ask them for more.
I mean, this cosign loan, to me is incredible. Why would anybody ever think that an individual would cosign a loan for your daughter? Why? It's a challenge for a parent to do it for their child, but for somebody who's not a family member, I can't imagine, even if this person was my goddaughter or something, I can't imagine that. it boggles the mind.
Well, it
But
certainly,
as Bob says, they do provide a measure of entertainment every month.
last month, I love these, when you have an attorney working for the Board of Ed who violates the rules and law. You'd think that an attorney would know that they're, they're violating. Okay, I sent out the spreadsheet this morning. I made a specific request this time. I mean, I frankly don't know who reads it, who cares about them, and if they meet any purpose. So I've asked people to please let me know if I can improve them or they serve any function. And if
I think
not,
they do. And I think that Eric keeps on harping on, and appropriately so, the whole 311 sort of customer service satisfaction surveys, because we get all the time, we get these complaints. Well, you know, I made a 311 call and nothing happened. And then NYPD or FDNY says, oh yeah, we went, we checked and there was no problem. Well, you know, that's happening pretty often.
well, I'd still like to hear some feedback from committee chairs, for example, that they actually found something in these spreadsheet that they didn't know and use it for their committee as a follow-up. Anyhow,
Okay,
I did, it's
I'm
out
sorry.
there. The one thing I didn't do and have not done for several months now is highlighting the ones I think are important. Since I was challenged once that an item of super importance in that person's mind was not highlighted enough to the board. That's not
Okay.
my role.
Yep.
So I don't do that anymore. But somebody had a-
Marty, could I ask a question?
Yep.
In terms of the spreadsheet, some of the items are marked 2022, and I know from the council that each June or September, they get new numbers and you know, they're redone if they haven't been passed or signed by the mayor or whatever. Those that are marked 2022, would those be the ones that would disappear? Or maybe you
No.
don't know. I'm just asking the question.
No, the question is, items go on the agenda and sometimes hang around for a long time without being enacted for whatever reason. But at the end of their term, which could be at the end of this June, the calendar gets wiped clean and they start over again.
Right.
Okay.
Term, it's not the year. They serve, we're having election for city council this month, not this, well, early votings this month.
The primaries are this month, the elections are in the fall, start for terms in January.
January will probably be a clean slate, start over again.
There's a good example of that. Number 480, Councilmember Sanchez talks about requiring rent control to continue after July 1 of 22. And it says it was adopted, so I'm not sure what that means to this list and to us and going forward.
Well, as I say, I sorted them by column 2, which says they were enacted and they have a law number associated with them. Without that, they're still in the other group.
I see.
Marty, I think that this particular spreadsheet was easier to identify some of the things dealing with Board 8. I think you should keep that up because it's much easier to look at. The only thing is that our meetings are done and they don't start again until September. So therefore, to enact anything at this point on any of the legislation is very difficult.
True. On the other hand, there's another point of information. This past Tuesday was supposed to be City Council Day, where they will be adding new legislation. particularly I'm aware of the legislation concerning the health insurance for
Yeah.
retirees.
Mhm.
And that was put off because of the weather, because of the atmosphere. So whatever I put out now would have been larger if the weather had held out, if the fires hadn't taken place. But your point is well taken. I can't speak for the calendar, and everything will have to wait for September. But I think it's a heads up to committee chairs that items of interest to their committees are being discussed and prepared for September, to discuss or take action by a committee on any particular intro.
Right, I agree.
Under old business, I just want to put on the record, appreciation to Dan, who is no longer on the board, for his service on both this committee, and congratulations on his most recent, on his recent marriage, not his most recent.
When did he get married? This is complete news to me.
January 3rd.
He got married January 3rd?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Wow. I'm
Very new.
surprised this is the first I'm hearing of it.
So I'm sharing it with you.
Yes, thank you.
And I found out I don't use it. I probably use it for about 1% of its value. FaceTime,
Facebook.
Facebook. I got a notice that there was a reference to Dan Patanak. I looked it up and I saw some wedding pictures.
Oh, wow.
So that's basically how I know.
Okay.
So the rules aren't in effect yet. Any new business? The only new business I would suggest, if you have friends who are looking for a committee and like to consider ours, welcome them. I think we'd all welcome them. Next meeting, September 11th, 2023, in person with a question mark, but I have no doubt we're going to be in person. So that means it'll be in the board office.
Well, as
On that-
implied, see you in
What?
September.
In September. On that note, since we've gone through new business, any comments, thoughts, motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn. Sylvia,
before-
care to second?
Yes,
Before-
I second.
Before taking the vote, which is a foregone conclusion, I presume. I can't presume. On that note, I want to thank each of you, all of you, for your work on this committee and your help, friendship, and input. As with all the past years, I have learned a lot from each of you and appreciate what you do for the board, what you do for me on this committee. And I wish you all a good summer and stay healthy.
And Marty, thank you for all of your hard work, for going through that ugly spreadsheet and for entertaining us with choice pieces of the Conflict of Interest Board. Keep up the good work and have a good summer.
Yeah, thank you,
And-
Marty, and thank you for always being available for wise counsel. I appreciate it.
I thank you all individually and collectively. Take care. See
Bye-bye.
you in 2 weeks at the board meeting.
Bye, Sylvia. See you in a couple of weeks.
Bye.
Bob, see you in a couple of weeks. And Marty in a couple of weeks.
Take care.
Night.